Hey guys, where I left you last, we set up a simple register connector, and all it did is it rendered a div with register page. And we set this up with React Router so it would be on the register route. And we were able to get this all to compile and run because we used the skip lib check in our tsconfig. Now, I took a look at seeing if I could get rid of this, and there doesn't seem to be an elegant solution to kind of get rid of the type error that we were getting. So I'm just going to keep skip lib check on to true because it seems to be working, and it seems to be the quickest and easiest way to get this working. So what we're going to do in this video is set up the register page a little bit more, and I want to first explain why I called this register connector. So what I'm going to do is kind of like a pattern. I haven't really seen this type of pattern before, and I kind of gave it names for each part, and this is probably similar to something you've seen before. So usually what you do is you have a container, and that'll pass information to a view component. And so we're basically going to take this principle and expand on it a little bit. So the view, we're going to have a view component, and that's going to basically just be presentational. So it doesn't have any functionality in it, it just looks nice. And then we're going to have a container which controls how we get data, when the data changes, all that stuff, and it feeds in through the view. Now for us, there's kind of one part, we need a middle piece, and the reason for that is because we're using React and we want to use React Native. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a container that feeds a connector which decides which view gets selected. So this connector basically glues together the container and the view. So the view is going to be different for React and React Native, but the container is what we're going to try to share. So this is where we're going to put our GraphQL querying and mutation stuff is in the container. And we're going to try having the connector connect these two. So the naming convention I've been using is I'll have a controller, a connector, and a view for this. So this is our connector. Right now there's no controller yet because we don't have any logic we want to. But what we're going to do today is set up the view portion of it and set up the what the register page is going to look like. And then we're going to get into the controller later. Alright, so I'm just going to move this up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder here called UI, and I'm going to just put in, or I could call this view, any of that works, and I'm just going to put in register view.tsx. And this is kind of going to be the place where I'm going to put all the view data, if you will, or presentational stuff. And so there's a nice little snippet that I like to use that just automatically creates the class and sets up a peer component in React. So I haven't shown you guys how to do this. I'd recommend setting this up because it makes it a little bit faster when typing. But if you're in Visual Studio Code, you can go to Preferences and then User Snippets. And then you can go to the language that you want to set up a snippet for. So we're using TypeScript. And we're using TypeScript in React, so if I click on that, this is what my snippet looks like. And you can create multiple snippets, so I have only one snippet right now. I've been trying to, I want to set up some more because it just speeds up kind of boilerplate code you have to type out every time. So if you want to pause this and copy this snippet or make your own snippet, or if you already have one, that'll set up a component quickly. I would recommend doing this. The other thing I wanted to mention real quickly is you'll notice I'm exporting instead of exporting default. The reason why I'm using export is I find that Visual Studio Code, at least when using TypeScript, seems to find stuff better if you just export it. So I'm just going to be using export instead of export default. Alright, so this is going to be our register view. And now here what I want to display is really just a form. For now we're going to say hello. And I'm going to, over here, just render now the register view. And you see Visual Studio Code auto imported that. What we're going to do now is set up Ant Design so we can actually style some stuff in here. So over here I am on the use in TypeScript section of Ant Design. I'll link this in the description below. We already have the first part of it complete to be able to add this. So what this, and by the way, I don't know if I explained what Ant Design was before, but what Ant Design is basically a UI library. So it has pretty buttons and grid system. Input fields is specifically what we're going to be using very soon, or like a form. And basically it's just some styled code so you don't have to write CSS. So we're going to install this right now and add it to our project. So the first part, we already have create React app with the TypeScript. We can skip to the part where we actually just add it. Alright, so I'm going to open in a new tab, and I'm going to say I need to make sure I'm in the web package. And I'm going to say yarn add, oops, I guess we already have that, and then Ant Design. Alright, so first thing, we want to just make sure this does indeed work. We're going to copy a button, and we'll just render a button here, button, and alright, so that I'm just going to copy exactly what they do there. Oops. Alright, I'm curious if this is okay, just can't find the module. We'll let that load. And the second one is adding the CSS. So I deleted the app.css, so we can add that back. I'm going to call it index.css, and we don't really have any CSS that we want for our project, so I'm just going to import the Ant Design CSS. And in index.tsx, I am just going to import index.css, and this should have basically all the styling for that. And looks like we're good to go after that. So okay, it's finished installing, so this should be good to go. Let's see what's wrong with this. It doesn't have a closing. It definitely has a closing, and can't find module. So I'm just going to restart my TypeScript server and make sure this is good, because the code looks fine to me. And alright, I don't see any problems now. It looks like we're good. So if I hop back over here, we should see the server, and it looks like it's fine. Alright, and we see a styled button, and that looks like how it should if we compare it to this. So it looks like it's styled properly. So cool. So we successfully got Ant Design up. So the next part that I want to start doing is working on the form. So luckily they have a nice little form example that's pretty much exactly what we want, and that is right here. So this is a login form, but we can easily fix this to be a register form, and then we can use this exact thing for our register form. So I'm just going to copy the inside of this and paste it in, and we can just get rid of that. Now of course we need to import some stuff. We'll import like so, and we need to type this guy. They don't really specify how exactly to type it, and they're doing something interesting. So they have a higher order component here for their form. I don't really want to use their higher order component to control the form. Instead, I want to use a library called Formik to do this. So this is a library built specifically for building out forms and making them easy in React. I've been really liking it. So what I'm going to do is just ignore this part where they wrap the component and see if we can get it to work. And I'm also going to just basically ignore this handle submit. And I'm also going to ignore this field decorator thing. And instead of a form, I'm just going to call this a div for now, and we'll see what this looks like. And again, I'm just going to get rid of all of this jazz. Checkbox, we're not going to worry about remember me, so we can just get rid of that. Forgot password is fine. So login or register now. So we just need to flip this. I'm going to say register, or I guess we could say login now. Alright, so I guess the last part is to figure out, we don't need to grab this from the props, is to figure out why we just did not import it. So form item. Okay, so it has no export form item. So I have no idea where they got form item from. Oh, okay, so form item is form.item. Okay. So we'll import form and we'll say const form item is equal to form.item. Like that. Alright, so now we can go see what this looks like. So we just simplified and got rid of a lot of this stuff. Alright, so it looks semi-resembling their form. We can at least see a username. See if I can type stuff. I can. We can see register and login now, so cool. I guess what I want to do is kind of split this up into 3 little bits here. So get them on different lines. So form item up there, and I'm just going to try splitting this into, oops, I guess I can use form item. I'm not really sure what form item is, if it just drops it down to a new line or whatever, but I'm going to just try wrapping every single thing in a form item. So what I did is I wrapped forgot password in a form item, I wrapped button in a form item, and anchor tag in a form item. What I'm hoping to do with this is to just drop them all the new lines. And okay, cool, it does. So that looks good. I think the only thing I want to do with this is like not make it super wide. So I'm just gonna real quick, oops, we're gonna say style, and I could just say the width is, I guess let's try 700. And then I want to just kind of center it on the page. Even that, maybe like 400. And I'm going to say div up here. So I'm going to wrap this, and I'm going to say style display flex. And then here I'm going to say margin auto. And what I'm hoping this will do will center it. And it doesn't. So usually what I like to do is just open up the inspector and kind of play around with the styles to get it to center. So I think actually, since I did display flex, what I can do is, oh, did it not? I don't even see this outer div that I said display flex on. All I see is this width one, and then I see all that. I'm gonna try refreshing. Okay, cool. Yeah, I thought this would work with the CSS. It looks like it just didn't refresh whenever I added it. Alright, cool. So this is roughly what I want the form to look like. I think this looks nice enough, at least for now. Let's go ahead and add Formik. So to add Formik, what we're going to do is just add it as a dependency. And nicely enough, Formik comes with TypeScript types. So we don't have to do any type of types for that. Same with Ant Design, as what you saw. We didn't have to add any types. And I think both of these libraries, both Ant Design and Formik, are written in TypeScript. So how Formik works is I'm going to show you kind of the old school way, which is right here. So this is where what Formik does is it gives you a bunch of stuff in the props, and then you can use those basically to make stuff simpler. Here's the thing of how Formik works. You can either have a higher order component or you can have a rendered prop. I prefer the higher order component, so we're going to be using that. Alright, so let's go ahead and import. So the function that we need from Formik is called withFormik. I'm going to say from Formik. And so now, this is what I usually have been doing. So right now we're exporting the register view right here. And so usually what I would do is I would rename this to just like C, and then down here I would say export const register view is equal to withFormik, and then I just wrap that with a C. But what I'm wondering is, now that I'm using TypeScript a lot, I could probably use a decorator So what I'll look for next video is maybe if we can clean this up using a decorator. But let's go ahead and fill this out. So you start with Formik is specifying your props, or you map props to values. So map props to values. And how this works is right here you have access to props, so whatever they pass into this view. Now for us this doesn't really matter, so we can just forget the props are there. And here we specify what the default values are for our fields, or the initial values are for our fields. So we have two fields, a username and a password, but really for us this is going to be email and password. And the initial values I want to be is just empty, so email and both password are just empty. And I'm just going to real quickly and then put fields, give them names. So I'm going to name this email, and I'm going to change that to email as well. So something about this is Formik requires you to have the name field on the input, so that's something to be aware of. And we'll do the same thing with the password. It's just have a name, so password. Alright, and next thing is, I think the only two required fields are this and the handle submit. And handle submit takes a couple different functions, or parameters I mean. The first thing is your values. So this is whatever the value of your form are. And this function will make more sense when we actually add it up here, but this is going to be called whenever your form is submitted. So these are going to be your values, and you could expand those if you want. That's going to be your email and your password. But yeah, for now it's just going to be values. And then here you have access to what it's called, like the Formik bag is what he refers it to, or the Formik props, which here you can set errors, you can set submitting, which we're going to be doing, and you also have access to the props if you need to access anything in the props and whatnot. This will make more sense when we fill it out though. Right now what I like to do is I'm just going to say const errors is equal to await props.submit, and we're going to pass in the values. And I'm going to make this an asynchronous function. So what I'm expecting is this function, or this component, should receive as a prop something called submit. So I'm going to go ahead and define this in TypeScript. So I'm going to say interface props. So I'm going to say submit, and this is going to be a function that takes the Formik values. That's the other thing. So we should say interface form values. So we're going to make interfaces, and these are TypeScript definitions for our form values. So we expect to have an email, which is a string, and a password, which is a string. So when I submit, I expect the values to be form values, and then I'm returning a promise, and I can return anything back. The proper typing for this is called Formik errors, and then you pass in form values. So what I'm expecting to be returned from submit is Formik errors, and if we take a look at this, we can see what that would look like, but first we have to add the definitions. So to add that to our props here, so we're going to say props, and we also need to get Formik props. So Formik props also comes from Formik props, and we pass in the form values here. And then at the bottom here, we also need to pass in our props and the form values. Alright, so now we can see this. Yay. Alright, so I'm going to explain real quickly what I just did. I just added a bunch of different types. So first off, in our component here, because we wrapped this with a higher order component that is with Formik, we now have access to some different props. So if I did this.props, I can now see I have on change, okay, not on change, handle change, there we go, and handle blur, handle submit. You'll notice I'm getting some nice auto completion and whatnot with that, right? The reason for that is I specified all of those with this Formik props. So how this works is I say, hey Formik, here are my form values, which are right here, and it creates basically some types that are going to be passed into my props. So now in the props here I have type definitions, and I can hover and I can see what these values return and whatnot. That's because I added this. And then I did an ampersand. What that does is it merges two types or interfaces. So here are props. We expect one that's going to be submit. So we could access submit here if we wanted, but we don't really need it. Alright, so then down here we pass in our props, and this is for with Formik to know about it. So props and then form values, and we just do these little brackets to specify that. And now all this has type definitions as well. Like if I hover over this, I can now see this errors expects Formik errors. So now what I usually do is I just check if errors, then I'm going to set errors. And we're going to deal with errors at a future time, but this is basically the logic that's going to handle this. And I'm just going to not worry about set submitting right now as well. Now, we haven't actually done anything, and our form won't actually work right now. But if we come over and register connect, I want to show you guys something. It is now red. So before this wasn't a problem, it wasn't red. And the reason why it's red is because we said we need to have a submit. You have to pass us a prop called submit. So here I am. I have to pass it a prop called submit. Oh, and by the way, over here, there's not always going to be an error when this is returned. So I either get passed Formik errors or I get passed back null. Alright, so I'm going to turn this into a higher order component real quick as well. So, or not higher order component, just a regular component. So I'm going to say register connect. And we're going to pass this in. And for now, I'm going to have a dummy submit function. So this is going to be dummy submit. It takes some values, which can be anything, and we're just going to console log them for now. And then we're going to return null. So we need to make this happy, and to make it happy, we have to pass in a dummy submit. Oh, it doesn't return. So notice it doesn't like the type, right? The reason for that is I'm expecting a promise back, and this does not return a promise. So we can just make this an async function, and now we're good to go. So here we promise null, and we're just logging the values. So now in our register view, we can continue on. So this is the old way to do it. So the old way is to take these things up here, and I'm going to say, I guess this is just one way, not necessarily the old way. So we're going to say on change, and we just pass in handle change. So we don't have to actually write the change function for this. Formik does it for us. So that's the utility of Formik, and it knows what field to update and whatnot based on this name prop. Alright, so we're also going to specify the value. This is passed in the props, so it's called values. So it's going to be values dot, and then the name of your input. So the name of this is email. And you'll notice how I got nice auto completion here as well. That's from specifying right here the form values. So it knows exactly what two values you should have, email and password, because of that. Alright, so we can do the same thing here. We can do on blur as well, so it can handle your blur. And then handle submit. So this is going to be something that the button is going to handle. So really what should happen is this should be wrapped in a form. So we're going to say form instead of a div. And then we're going to say handle submit, or on submit I should say. Handle submit. So I don't know if this button is actually going to trigger the form to be submitted. It's called primary. We'll see. I don't know if I have to do type submit or whatnot. Or I guess it says HTML type right here is submit, so I guess it will work. I think our form's good to go. Let's try it out. So what should happen is I should be able to type stuff. Cool, no errors in the log. So I should be able to type stuff. Alright, so we messed something up, and that's because I said values.email twice. I'm going to say values.password now. And then when I hit register, we should see just in the log what the value is. So I'm going to say Bob, and I'm going to say Bob2 as the password. And when I click register, sure enough, we see this in the log. So perfect. So that's all I want to do for this video, guys. We set up a basic version of Formik and a basic version of our form using Ant Design. We're going to come back and we're going to do Formik in a slightly different way, because right now there's a little bit of duplication / boilerplate across here and across here. So we'll be fixing that up. And then also talking about errors. Right now we don't really handle errors in any way, so we'll do that. But that's it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching.